All right, I'm back here with another New Scott interview, and today I have a guy that's wrestled in over 30 countries all over the world, international wrestling superstar Brody Steele. How are you doing today?
Excellent.
Um,
And by the way, I just have to clarify, I've been in 30 countries, but I've only actually wrestled in 18 countries, if we're being completely truthful.
all right. Were you a fan of professional wrestling growing up?
Not a diehard fan. You see, I'm 48, so when I was a kid, well, I can remember when we first got cable TV in 1977. So, I was 10 years old. So we had two channels before that, and even when we got cable TV, it went from two channels to five channels. So probably until I was a teenager, I'm going to say 15 or 16 years old, the only wrestling I'd ever seen on TV was international wrestling and Grand Prix wrestling. International being the bigger one in the 70s with Leo and the Beast and all that. So it would come on Saturday afternoons, and it was always on the TV, but we only had that and CBC and the French channel. So I mean, everybody in the Maritimes had wrestling on their TV Saturday afternoon, whether you're watching it or not. My father was a diehard fan. I was very familiar with what was going on. I wouldn't say I was a fan, but I knew all their names, so I guess I was somewhat of a fan.
Did you watch WWE or WCW or anything like that growing up?
There was no such thing on our TV.
Oh, yeah.
When wrestling, probably in 1983 or four, we started getting the main event, the WWF main event on Saturday nights.
Yeah.
So I was in my teens already. Every once in a while, AWA would come on TV on Sports Channel because they used to run out of Winnipeg. So became a little bit familiar with that. NWA, I remember by that time I would pick up wrestling magazines once in a while, and I knew who Ric Flair and them were, but I'd never seen them on TV. Until 1985, all we had was local wrestling on TV.
Right, right. I wasn't thinking of the time frame there. Now, when you were growing up, you weren't as big uh, as you are now.
Of
Uh,
course not. I would have killed.
no, no, no. I meant like when you were in high school, you weren't as built as you are now. You talked about being quite skinny. Uh,
Yes.
what made you want to change and get into bodybuilding?
Getting laid probably would have been my number one priority, and I noticed that being skinny wasn't really working for me. No, I hated being skinny. I admired. I remember watching the Conan movies and stuff like that, and I admired Arnold Schwarzenegger and the whole journey of building a physique. And like I said, flippantly, but it's the truth. I mean, I just thought having some muscles would help me with the girls a little bit. So, but I got addicted right away. My first workout, I never stopped, and that was 35 years ago. I've basically trained 6 days a week ever since.
In 1994, I think it was, you won the New Brunswick Bodybuilding Championship.
95 and
90,
96.
95, 96.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Well, it was good. I wasn't a good bodybuilder, but it was about the sports changed a lot. I mean, I was good enough for. I mean, I looked okay on stage. I didn't have national potential or pro potential or anything like that. It's very hard when you're tall, especially with legs. I'd have to have been 300 pounds on stage to be competitive as a pro. But I enjoyed the process. Just getting your wife competes, my wife competes, so you're familiar with how hard it is and how strict and disciplined. So just to be able to get up there and do okay is something that most people would never be able to do. So it's cool in that sense. I just love training. I love the sport.
You were also into powerlifting, correct?
No strongman competition. I've never
Strongman
done
competitions, okay.
competition. I did strongman competitions.
Your specialty was grip strength?
Yeah.
Talk about that for people that might not know what that is.
Well, I held a record for some time of I held 375 pounds in each hand for 90 seconds, and with a handle. I don't know what the gauge would be, but a handle about that big. So your hands are almost open, so it's just pure finger strength. But I would specifically, and I stopped doing this probably 10 years ago, but I specifically would train my grip in the gym. I'd take two 45-pound plates and put them facing in so it's smooth on both sides and just pick it up with my hand and hold it as long as I could, and or I'd just grab the heaviest dumbbells and hold them as long as I could. So yeah, I enjoyed those. I did quite well at the strongman competitions. Actually, I was the maritime champion, Atlantic champion a couple times.
You were also big into softball, correct?
Yep.
How did that come into play?
Well, I started playing ball when I was a kid, baseball, softball, whatever. But when I was a teenager, they started in Cole Harbour, where I grew up. There was a men's league, a men's softball league, and they decided that they would let a kids team in. But you had to be 16 to 20. But I was only 14. So, but I lied about my age, and I made the team, and I dominated the league at 14. They fucking hated me. I was cocky. I was hitting home runs and walking around the bases and laughing at them. So it's kind of a wrestling character on a softball field, even at 14.
Now, when you got into professional wrestling, you met some guys at your local gym, correct?
Yeah.
Who were the guys that you met?
Well, I'd already known Gary a little bit, but I realized that wrestling was in town when I saw, well, Edge and Christian were there. I don't know if Christian, yeah, he must have, yeah, he was on the tour, but I don't remember seeing him in the gym. But I remember seeing Edge in the gym every day, and I didn't know who he was. Nobody knew who he was then because he hadn't been in WWE. But he had long blonde hair. He was 6'4" with abs, and I knew he wasn't just some guy in town, doing door-to-door sales. And plus, he was with Glenn Kalka, who was a monster, and Scott Demore was with them. What's that guy's name that died around that time? Lazansky?
Mike Lazansky. Yeah.
He was with them, and Gary, and that's when I contacted Emil. So Gary gave me his contact, and I contacted Emil.
What was it about professional wrestling that made you want to go get trained?
Money.
Money?
Yeah, purely money. I wanted to see the world too. It wasn't my lifelong dream. I became very passionate about wrestling, and I am to this day. But no, I just thought it was a way to make money. And to be honest with you, probably my generation and older, that was everybody's reason. Now guys will talk about passion and all this fucking bullshit, but it should be primarily about making money. It is a profession.
Right. You were trained at first by Emile Dupree?
Yeah.
Not Renee, like Emile told me.
No, Renee was like 13 or 14. He was there too. He was getting trained as well. But I was in the ring with Emile probably for about 2 weeks, and then Gary came down from Calgary with Massive Damage. They got there about a week before the tour. So I get in the ring with them a few times, and I knew nothing, to be honest with you. But they did what they got me mentally prepared more than anything else. It was too late to train a guy. All I knew how to do was get punched in the throat by Emile. So it was. I wasn't ready by any stretch of the imagination, but at least these guys, they were kind, and Gary's such a great guy, and so was Massive. And they were very helpful. They at least they prepared me for what I was getting in for mentally.
Yeah, no, I only mentioned the Renee thing as a joke. I was at Emile's house one time, and they were telling me all about how Renee actually trained you. But I knew the difference, but I didn't say anything to them, of course. What was the hardest part of training for you to catch on to? Was there anything that was harder over something else?
Bumps. Just taking a proper bump. I was probably in the business 2 years before I could take a good bump. Now I pride myself, and I think I can bump as well as any big guy in the business. But it's a really difficult thing, and even when I went out to work with Leo in Calgary the next year, I still struggled with my bumps. It's one of those things though that as soon as you take a good bump, you'll never take another bad one, because you realize that taking shitty bumps hurts you. When you learn how to take a perfect bump, it really, you don't even really feel it, and then your mind and body connect. That's the way to do it.
Was there anybody else in your training class, or was it just you that they were training?
With Emile?
Yeah.
No, it was just me.
Just you?
And Renee.
You and Renee?
Yeah.
And getting booked with Grand Prix, did that come from your training with Emile, or is that something you approached after?
Oh, no. That's the only reason that because I had talked to Emile on the phone, and then he wanted to meet me, and he was kind of reluctant. He didn't really need anybody, but when he asked me how big I was, and I told him, and then I went out to his house and I met him, and he was impressed with. I was training for a bodybuilding show then, so I was in top shape. I probably only weighed about 275, but that was pretty big back then. And yeah, he changed his mind upon meeting me, and he said, "Okay, we'll set up the ring in the backyard tomorrow, and we'll start." So, and to be honest with you, he wasn't sure yet if he was going to run that summer. But I think with me and Renee training in the backyard, it kind of sparked his interest to run that summer because I think he had lost money in '97 and the tour with Edge and them and Edge and
It was
Bad
Edge,
News.
Christian, Bad News
Yeah,
Brown, everybody. Rick Martel.
Yes, yeah, they had lost money that year. The expenses were too high, so I don't. He was really reluctant to run in '98, but he did, thankfully, and that got me started. But I think he ran. He would never admit it, but I think he ran mostly because he had a big local guy.
Nowadays, everybody goes over their matches beforehand. Was that done back then when you were breaking in?
Yeah, for new guys, it was. Everybody, most veterans won't admit it, but of course it was. Not the whole match, but but you pride yourself on getting to a point where you don't have to do that. But for new guys, I think it's almost essential. And if I wrestled a couple. Actually, I was in a tag match 2 nights ago in Quebec City with it was all new guys. Well, one of them was Sylvain Grenier,
Yeah.
who I guess isn't a new guy, but he still doesn't. He's still green. I don't care how long he's been doing it. He doesn't know anything. So, I planned out a lot in that match because otherwise you're just in for a disaster. And we actually got a pretty good match out of it. I would say the entire experience of the three of them combined was maybe a couple hundred matches, if that. And that's with Sylvain having 180 of them.
Yeah, he was in WWE with Renee there back in
Yeah,
like
yeah,
2003, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. At some point, you went out to Calgary to train at the Hart House with Leo Burke. Is that right?
Yeah, but it wasn't the Hart house. It was Bret Hart's house, not Stu Hart's house.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that was January of 2000 of 1999.
How did that come about?
Well, Leo had been with us in 1998 on the tour with Emil, and he looked at me. He says, "You've got a great look." He says, "I think WCW would be interested in you." And the camp that he was running, that Gary was at, and a bunch of guys, that was funded by WCW. So it was basically a training camp for future WCW guys. So Leo invited me out, and we had made arrangements that I would go out after Christmas. So I went out and spent a couple months training with them 5 days a week.
Did it mean as much to you as it probably would other people going to train at Bret Hart's house?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I wasn't a big fan, and I wasn't starstruck by Bret Hart or anything, but I had absolute respect for what he had accomplished and what the Hart family had accomplished and what Leo Burke had accomplished, especially. So, because where I grew up in the Maritimes, he was our Hulk Hogan. So yeah, it meant a lot to me. I knew that I was in a very elite situation.
When Grand Prix started running in 1998, you toured with them. Did they run full time then? Like, how many shows did they do that summer?
7 a week.
7 a week for
Yeah.
how long?
Oh, probably 8 a week because because when we would do, he would try to do Saturday night in Antigonish or down in that area because we would do North Sydney on Sunday night, but he would like to do an afternoon show in Cape Breton somewhere. So on the way through, we'd go to Cheticamp or Dingwall or wherever. So he would try to do two on Sundays, but it was every day. There was no days off.
You were the Mighty Hercules back then?
Yeah.
Were you the Patriot here or overseas?
Oh, I was only the Patriot for one show
Okay.
in Edmonton.
Okay. For
Yeah.
Can Am or?
For Can-Am. Yeah, it was the only show I ever did for them.
Okay.
When I was out there training with Gary.
Okay. You worked as Hercules here, then Kingman, then Brody Steele. During an interview in '99, you mentioned getting a WCW tryout, and you wanted to use the name Brody Steele. Why didn't you use Brody Steele from the beginning if that's what you wanted?
Well, I had no choice with Emil.
Right.
He names you. You don't. He doesn't say what do you want to be called. He tells you what you're going to be called. I never would have picked the Mighty Hercules, trust me.
But
But when you break in, and now it's probably different. Guys come with all kinds of ideas, and most of the promoters are marks, so that they just do whatever. But I mean, ask anyone who works for Mike Hughes though. You go for work for Mike Hughes, he's calling you what he wants to call you, and if you don't like it, just don't go work for him.
right.
So that's the way it was back then. So when I wasn't with Grand Prix anymore, and we started with Real Action Wrestling, my nickname for my whole life was Kingman. So I thought that I might be able to identify with the crowd in the Halifax area more to use my nickname, where people knew me, kind of as I guess, as a barroom brawler and a general jackass.
Were you Kingman overseas then too?
No, I was never Kingman
Never
overseas.
Kingman overseas.
I was Kingman in Japan for the one tour I did in Japan because they didn't think that they'd be able to pronounce Brody Steele because it was Bloody Steer.
Right.
So they called me Kingman, but that was the only time overseas.
When were you in Japan?
2004.
2004. In 1999, Scott Gallant started running Real Action Wrestling. Was he the only guy running the promotion, or was there more people involved than him?
I think Mike Hughes he was probably the money guy, but Mike was running the promotion.
Mike was running it? Okay.
Yeah,
And around that time, the infamous phone call with Emil happened, where you guys told him you were going to work for Raw, and he came. And he said you guys were committing the cardinal sin.
yeah.
What are your memories of that?
Well, there is no memories of it because it didn't happen that way.
Oh,
I think that might be urban myth. I had spoken to Emil months before when Raw was when Raw had asked me to work the tour, and I called him and I told him he said and he seemed disappointed and he asked me to come out and talk to him. And when I went out, I brought the poster with me and I showed him the poster. I said, "This is the talent," and most of it was the guys that he had used, Gary and Todd McPhee, and me and Mike. And I said, "If you have a problem with this, I won't do it." "Oh, no, 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 no." He says, thank you for letting me know." That was the last professional conversation I ever had with the man. He never booked me again.
so where did the Cardinal Sinner's name come from?
Well, there was a rumor that he had told somebody that we had committed the cardinal sin, but I don't think if it was a phone call, it wasn't to
Wasn't
me.
to you?
It might have been to Mike or to Scott Gallant or something. But when we had heard about that, we thought it sounded like a good name.
Yeah, it definitely was. Um,
Yeah.
uh, the name Real Action Wrestling, when abbreviated, is RAW, Raw, which was WWE's show at the time. What were your thoughts on that?
I hated it. Yeah, I hated it. I thought it was. I didn't. I've never been a big fan of ripoffs, but even though I guess everything in wrestling is a ripoff to some extent.
Yeah,
No, I didn't like it. But it seemed to have worked at least short term.
yeah. They would later got sued over that. Actually, I think it was 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
Starting out with Real Action Wrestling, did you end up, or starting out with Real Action Wrestling, did you think it would end up getting the following that it did?
No, no. And for people that weren't around during that era, you were you watching? Were you coming to the shows
Oh
then?
yeah, yeah. That's when I started in 2001.
How old would you have been?
2001, I would have been 20. I would have been 20.
Oh, okay, okay. I thought you were younger, and I
No,
didn't realize how old you
no,
are. No,
no. I'm ancient.
I knew we had a great crew. I knew because at that time Warren and Bryan that owned the company were allowing me and Mike to make a lot of the decisions because they knew enough to know they didn't know anything. So I thought we had a good chance of doing well. I wish the money would have been handled better. I think it still could probably be going because I mean you know the kind of crowds we were getting in Halifax. So to this day nobody approaches them. It was unreal, and it was every 2 weeks. So that
You guys were getting close to like 1,500 people every 2 weeks at Exhibition Park. It was packed.
yeah.
Do you think the following that it got had to do with the roster that was used, or the promoting that was being done, or was it everything that was combined?
I think the roster I don't think people appreciated how good the roster was at the time. They probably appreciate it more now. I think it's because wrestling was going through an edgy period, and we gave them an edgy product. And the fans that went there, especially the ones that would show up hours before the show and hang out in the parking lot, they really thought they were part of something. They thought they were hanging out with the cool
Yeah.
kids, and we were the cool kids. I mean, if you ask anyone that was on those tours in that era, uh, when we'd walk into a nightclub in Halifax, the place would stop. I mean, we were legit stars in that little area, and the people really gravitated towards it. So yeah, although the roster was great and it kept them coming back, I don't think it's something they realized at the time because wrestling was about to die, and they didn't realize how good they had it until it was
Yeah.
gone.
Well, I agree. There's been nothing like it ever since, in my opinion, anyway. What were your memories of working with Bad Boy Batty Bat?
Oh, geez, I almost forgot about him. I think he was only with us for a week or
Yeah,
two.
I have a show where you kind of beat him up in the ring a little bit there.
I beat him up a couple times, but it's because he was a dickhead. He didn't want to listen. He's just one of those guys. He had been around for a few years doing 3 shows a year, and I remember he wanted to do this thing where he would jump off the top rope and leg drop me with a steel chair under his leg. Why in the fuck would I let you do that? So, and he was kind of insistent on it, and I think he would have done it had I gave him the chance. So I wasn't a big fan of his, so I just beat him up as you
Do
do.
you know anything about the story? I think it was Bill Scullion that said it, that when they made him puke inside his mask during a match.
I've heard the story, and I would have been there, but I don't remember it.
Do you have any memories of the night you got into it in the ring with Corporal Chaos in Halifax?
I think he just didn't go up for a choke slam or something, so I just choke slammed him
Yeah,
again, something
and
like
then beat him
that.
in the
I
face.
actually liked Corporal Chaos. I didn't hurt him, that's for sure. I was just
Yeah.
mad.
I found that footage the other day. Actually, I completely forgotten about it. When did Brian Marchand and Warren Olson come into the picture?
Right away, they started. Well, no, Scott Gallant started it. Yeah, here's what happened. Scott Gallant started. We ran a little tour in the fall of '99, and then in 2000, really nothing happened. I went to Puerto Rico for a quick tour, and they fucked me on a pay, so I flew home and quit wrestling. And I vowed. I told my wife. I said, or my girlfriend, future wife at the time. I told her I'm never going to wrestle again. I've had enough of this shit. So I went and got a job at a meat packing plant. A unionized job. It was supposed to be the best job in Moncton. It paid well and all that, but I hated it. So it wasn't long into it. Uh, Actually, Real Action ran another little tour, and the meatpacking plant had gone on strike. So I was on strike with them, just collecting strike pay, which is like $60 a week. And Real Action ran another little tour, and I went over and I tore my biceps in the ring in PEI. So I was off for a couple months and off of work. Then I was getting like disability for my recovery, and that's when Warren and Brian contacted Scott Glenn and Mike Hughes and offered to purchase Real Action Wrestling. So immediately, me and Mike started a little wrestling school to get a couple people trained up, which wasn't connected with Real Action Wrestling. We funded it and made the money, and we started meeting with Warren and Brian in the winter to help them book the summer. So I think we did our first tour in April,
2001?
and did like a 2 week tour, shut down for a month, and then ran the whole
That
summer.
was 2001, right?
That was 2001, yeah.
Who were the students? Duke McIsaac was one.
Duke McIsaac and Corporal
Yeah.
Chaos, and a guy named Cash Canuck
Right.
that ended up quitting right away.
What was Brian and Warren's background? I know Brian was a school teacher, but why did they want to get into running a wrestling company?
I really don't know. I guess because they were fans.
What were your thoughts on them running the promotion?
I liked both of them right away. I got along with Warren very well. Brian, I wasn't. I wouldn't have. He wouldn't have been somebody that I would hang out with. But we had a mutual respect. We had a good working relationship. It started to deteriorate as we went on. as things happen. But when you're in close quarters with people, Brian did something that I'll never forget to this day. We were in a bar one night, and we overheard him telling people that he's the boss and he's the only one making money here, and these guys are just wrestlers. They're no, you know. So he's trying to get himself over with girls and or with whoever at the expense of his talent. Telling them that we're nothing and that he's making all the. And the fact of the matter was, we were all getting paid a guarantee, and he was losing money. So he was not only erroneous, but he was hurting his own product, and that always stuck with me. So when I left them a year later, that was actually one of the reasons.
Bobby Roode was a part of Real Action Wrestling. Did you guys know back then that he was going to become one of, if not the best wrestlers in the world? I was with Kurt Angle about a week or so ago, and he told me that he thinks Bobby is the best wrestler in the world.
Um, yes, I mean physically, yes. We knew he was already, even though he was only a couple years in, he was already among the top, I thought, in-ring performers. But whether he was going to be as successful as he is, you just don't know. Because there's a lot of people that are extremely good that never become financially successful. But it's worked out very fortunate for him. But yeah, he's one of those guys. When we were putting that roster together, we had never even met Bobby, me or Mike. But we had seen some video footage, and he was so highly praised by anybody that had worked with him. He was one of the first people we contacted.
He had worked for Grand Prix prior, is that right?
Yeah, the year before, I think he'd worked for Grand Prix. And we were weary of Bobby in that we thought he was going to, because we're running against Grand Prix. Because we didn't know Bobby, we didn't trust him. We thought there was a chance that we were going to bring him down, and then he was going to leave us and go work for Grand Prix and just use us because we were starting a little earlier. So we thought he was going to get a couple shows out of us, and we were going to pay his trans, and then he was just going to say, fuck you guys, and go work for a meal. So I was watching him like a hawk, and he was staying at my house. And one night, it was about 2 a.m, and I heard the front door open. And I was living in Shediac then, not far from a meal. And I heard the front door open, and I thought, that fucker's going in the middle of the night to talk free. And I got up, and I sat on the couch, and I was waiting for him. I was going to give him an earful when he came back. And he came back like 2 minutes later, and he goes, what are you doing up? I said, well, I couldn't sleep. And he goes, yeah, me either. I was just getting some fresh air. And that was the first time I trusted him. So we became very good friends. Actually, I was talking to him yesterday. We've become very good friends, ever since. But at first, we were convinced, in our small little universe, it was us versus Grand Prix, and he was going to fuck us.
Your memories of the night Kurgan turned on the fans and joined the Cardinal Sinners. That was one of the craziest reactions I remember seeing at a Real Action Wrestling show.
Yeah, it was nuts. It was nuts. And we, being part of the storyline, we're almost scared because when Kurgan turns heel, he turns fucking heel. There was spit flying out of his mouth and steam shooting out of his ears. He was, he's so big and strong. You're trying to hold him back, and even though he's working, he's still hard to hold back. But yeah, it was that was the night that I always said that the Halifax wrestling business was completely broken open, but Kurgan never returned. His dad died a few days after that, and he never appeared in Halifax again.
Didn't
that's or no, I might be wrong about that. He might have appeared one or two more times, but we couldn't keep the sustained business of him turning heel because of just life happened.
I remember he returned at least once because he was on the first TV taping, but I don't know if he was there much in between.
Okay, maybe it was once more.
What are your memories of what the Cardinal Sinners mean to the history of maritime wrestling?
Well, I don't think many people are familiar with the history of maritime wrestling. To us that were involved with it, it meant a lot. But outside of you and a few of the older fans, the young guys don't. The young guys that have broken in the last 10 years, they have no idea who we were or what happened. Unfortunately, I think that's one of the things missing is, when I broke into wrestling, even though I wasn't really that big of a fan, I studied the history of each region I have ever gone to. I studied the history. When I first started going to England, I knew everything about English wrestling when I got there because I didn't want to be one of those bastards that didn't know who Big Daddy was. The young guys now, they just don't they don't either care or they don't know that they're supposed to care. I don't know. But no, it means a lot to
Yeah,
us.
no, and you're completely right about that. There's so many of the news guys that come up and talk to me about like stuff that you guys did, and I'll tell them something that you guys did, and they have absolutely no idea that like any of this stuff happened pre like
Yeah,
2006. I'm like, it's crazy to me, you know.
yeah.
Um,
I don't know, man.
I
It's
it
unfortunate.
is.
Yeah, like I said, it meant a lot to us.
Did you ever hold the Real Action Wrestling title? How come?
No. Didn't feel I needed it for one. I was the booker, although the booking committee at the time was me and Mike, with Bobby Roode actually having some pull, but it was officially me and Mike. But and Mike wouldn't mind me telling you this, but Mike was a kid then, so Mike slept through booking meetings. Mike is the most driven, organized promoter I know now. But in those days, for him to be part of a booking committee, he would put his 2 cents worth in. But I was the one that was waking up early, and so I really felt the money in that promotion was Mike as the top heel, and Bobby eventually being the top babyface when he broke off from being with the Sinners. So that was what I always tried to work towards. So keeping them both strong, having the title on one of them at most times, I thought was the best course of action.
In in August 2001, I think, August or September, Real Action Wrestling got their first television deal with Eastlink Television. What was the reaction of the boys in the back and the promoters, and when all that finally came to peace?
Uh, so I'll be honest, I don't want to sound like the grumpy old guy, but I didn't like the
No.
deal. There was no way for them to make money. It was just an expense. That's all it was. I really don't think it helped business. I think that it could have ran as a live event company more successfully, but they forked over thousands and thousands of dollars for that TV deal without ever getting a penny back. So financially, I don't think it was beneficial. It was a good experience for guys to work in front of television. It was fun. It probably helped the live gates at Halifax a little bit that it was a TV taping, but all in all, I didn't like the deal. So it didn't make dollars, so it didn't make sense to me.
What was it like working with the Eastlink crew, and your thoughts on the final show that aired? Did they understand wrestling at all?
Yeah, I think they were good shows. Yeah, I remember Brad McCullum was one of the guys, and I'd gone to school with him. He was one of the producers, so he was very easy to work with. Yeah, no, I thought they did a good show.
In September 2001, Gary Williams and Bobby Roode had a ladder match. At the end of the match, you powerbombed Bobby through a table, and he was broken apart from the Cardinal Sinners. Why did you take Bobby away from the Sinners?
Well, like I said earlier, I thought that the money in the end would be with Bobby and Mike at the end of the season.
In their they main evented the Maritime Wrestling Expo, the final show at Exhibition Park.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so. Yeah, you'd know better than I
they
would.
did.
I know
Yeah.
that was at the time.
Yeah. During 2001, a few guys that worked for Real Action Wrestling got some tryout matches with WWE. Bobby Roode, Gary Williams, Joe Legend, Larry Destiny all worked for and had tryouts with WWE. How come you didn't get a tryout at that point? Was it not something that you pursued?
No, I hadn't pursued it.
How come?
No, those guys were all guys that were always on the phone with them. So I had never at that time I'd never contacted
Was
WWE.
that did you just not have any interest, or what was?
Yeah, oh yeah, I had lots of interest. I guess I was busy. I never got around to it. That's actually been the highlight and the downfall of my careers. I've kept busy, too busy to really pursue the big stuff. Because I don't really care much about WWE, but I would have loved to have gone there and made some money. But I think when I was at that stage, I should have been viciously pursuing New and All Japan. That's where a big guy like me would have made money. But I was busy enough to not really be that driven behind. I didn't know about computers or anything back then either. So it was all phone calls for me.
You thought I ran the internet at that point.
I thought you were the guy. I thought you were Bill
Yeah.
Gates.
In March 2002, you did get a match with WWE the night after WrestleMania 18. You had you did a tag match with Bobby Roode against Tommy Dreamer and Kidman. How did that tryout come about, and your thoughts on that match?
Well, I honestly can't remember how it came about. I remember being on the phone with Kevin Kelly. Now, I don't remember if Bobby had set that up or if I had gotten Kevin Kelly's contact, but it was supposed to be, I was supposed to work Bobby Roode that night in a dark match. So that's what we'd been training for. That's what we'd been hoping for. And then we got there and we found out we weren't working at all. So we were dejected and we were sitting at the buffet table, just stuffing our faces. And we thought we might as well get a free meal out of it at least. And then they came to us with like 2 minutes to go and they said, get geared up. It's you and Bobby versus Kidman and Dreamer. So we put a quick match together, went out, and I had very little to do with the match, but I managed to blow a big spot, which was devastating to me. To this day, it's one of those things like if you had pissed your pants when you were in grade 3, you think of it for the rest of your life, even though it doesn't matter anymore, and it gives you that sinking feeling. That's what I feel about that spot. But whatever. I think even then, because I was in shape, I was big, I was still young enough. I think that I caught enough eyes, and that if I'd pursued it, I could have done more dark matches and maybe got a shot. But I didn't. I never contacted them again, and I can't really say why. When we left there, ACW started. We ran the entire summer of 2002, and then I was off for 3 days, and I went to Europe, where I stayed for years. 8 months a year. So I guess I was just too busy to really care. And then a few years passed, and then all of a sudden you're in your late 30s, and it's too late anyway. But probably I should have pushed harder, but I didn't. So whatever.
Did you get any feedback from any of the agents that night from that match?
Yes. Who's the fat guy that couldn't work? It was part of the
Michael
Freebirds.
Hayes?
Long hair. Michael Hayes. Yeah, he liked it. He liked my look. He told me I needed more experience, which was right, and he said just keep calling. And I never called again. So my bad.
That was the night Brock Lesnar debuted. Did you have any interactions with him? I remember you telling me that you were surprised when you watched him leap the 4 foot vertical wall.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd seen him backstage. I didn't know who he was, and he introduced himself to me. Because I was older than him. He probably thought that it was his place to do it, and we had a little chat. And he was a real nice guy, and then he went out to they called him out to the ring for something, and I happened to be heading that way, so I walked with him. Then he jumped over that fucking 4 foot thing in one leap. I've never seen anything like it. I remember because Michael Hayes was standing right there too, and I locked eyes with him, and it was like we were both in disbelief. This guy's a 280, and he just leapt over something that a cat would have a hard time with.
In 2002, Bobby Bass had the idea to start his own promotion, Atlantic Coast Wrestling, later changing the name to All Canadian Pro Wrestling. Your thoughts on when you heard that he was splitting away from Real Action Wrestling?
Well, I happen to have some inside information at the time of the financial status of Real Action Wrestling, so I was looking for any ship to, I was like the rat hanging over the side of the ship, looking for any passing ship to jump onto. So as soon as I found out, I knew that Bass's wife was worth a lot of money, so I knew that it was that ship would stay afloat for a little while. I had no high hopes for him running past one summer. Buddy Lane was his top guy, and Buddy Lane can't get anything right. So I knew with Buddy Lane involved, it was destined for failure. But I was hoping to get one summer out of it, which is exactly what I did.
So that's why you left, was because you knew the financial
Yeah,
problems.
Real Action Wrestling. I knew they couldn't survive a summer, and they didn't.
ACW only ran 4 shows in Halifax in the spring of 2002, and then they never came back. Why was that?
Because we weren't drawing. Because Buddy Lane was in charge of the advertising. So they would say, "Here, buddy, here's $700. Go look after the advertising." And he put 600 in his pocket and put a few posters up and said, "Yeah, we're expecting a big house," and we would get 12 people.
After a while, they did try to come back. I believe it was in July of 2002. They booked the show at the big Halifax Forum, the 6,000 seat arena. at the time of the show, there was about two people in the crowd. That show was canceled. What are your memories of that?
Vague. I do remember being there, but I really don't remember how I felt. I mean, I was indifferent. I didn't give a fuck. By that point, actually, I had already made contact with Org Williams in Ireland, and I knew that I was leaving in mid-September, and I was hoping to embark on a new career in Europe.
Why would they book the main form when the multi-purpose center is right next to it?
Because Buddy Lane's an idiot.
Simple enough. Um, After a few months of working with ACW, Bobby Roode and Cowboy Mike Hughes left and went back to Real Action Wrestling. What were your thoughts when they left?
I was sad to see them go, but I understood why they went. See, Bobby was given the job as booker, and he had great ideas. And even though the advertising was terrible, and they were letting us down in every way professionally, Bobby had great ideas that he would present that I think could have drew money, and Bass would always override them, and always override them in a way that Bobby Bass ended up being the star of the show. But I don't think anybody was interested in a 60-year-old has-been that nobody knew being the star of the show. They wanted Bobby Roode to be the fucking star of the show, but it would always be Bass at the end, being the hero, and he was the heel. He was my heel manager, and he was always ended up being the hero. So Bobby just got frustrated, and him and Mike at the same time. I remember Bobby had made and Bobby, ACW was starting to, the crowds were really low then. It looked like we were in trouble. And it looked like Real Action Wrestling, even though we knew financially they were fucked, they were starting to come, their houses were coming up. We were paying attention. So it looked like the trend was to jump over there. And Bobby had to. He had kids, and he had an alimony payment. He had to. And he left. And I remember Bobby Bass being an absolute prick to Mike Hughes a few days later. And I remember Mike Hughes picking up the phone call. We were at Flesh's apartment in Halifax. And Mike called Brian or Warren. And I remember hearing Mike say, "Same deal as Bobby?" And they said yes. And he hung up, and he told me, "I'm leaving." And he was gone the next day. So I was all by myself then.
Why didn't you go back, or did you just not want to?
I didn't want to. And it's funny because Bobby and Mike both kept telling me, "Call Warren, call Brian." I said, "No, I'd rather not work than work for those guys," because they were both sinking ships. At that point there was no good place to go. They were both going to be done soon. It turned out that I made the better decision because we outlasted them by a month, even though we got fucked on our last week's pay. So we actually really outlasted them by 3 weeks. And Mike came back to ACW, but they wouldn't take Bobby back.
I think Gary and Duke also came in the last
Yeah,
month.
Gary Duke and Mike came back, and I had a feud with Duke. I was the babyface, and he was the heel, believe it or not.
At the end of July in 2002, Real Action Wrestling ran its last show, leaving most of the guys unpaid. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
Well, I mean, I hate when promoters do that, and the same thing happened to us with ACW at the end of the year. So, but you can only point the blame at them so much. Once somebody starts owing you money, the smart thing to do, as soon as somebody's a day behind in your pay, you got to tell them then, pay up or I'm gone, and you got to follow through. It's like disciplining a child, isn't it? You have to follow through. And Bass ended up 7 days behind on my pay, and then he just left town, and I never got it. So after one day, because we get paid daily, after one day, I should have just said no. So, and they should have all done the same with Real Life. But we love wrestling. And, you're hoping for the best. You're hoping that you get that one big house and everyone gets paid, but sometimes it doesn't happen.
And I think a lot of people think because Real Action Wrestling was still drawing very well in Halifax that they were drawing very well everywhere, right? But I don't think that was the case.
And they weren't drawing very well in Halifax either at the time. They were down to a few hundred by that point.
I think the last one had 4 or 5, but you're right. The ones before that didn't have that, but they had more than the other towns, I think. A few weeks or a month later, ACW closed, and now there was nobody running in the Maritimes. Your thoughts on that?
I didn't care. I knew that ACW was going to be finished. I knew I was heading to Europe, so from a personal perspective, I didn't care. I cared that I was out a week's pay. That was the only thing I cared about. I had no nostalgic feelings for real action wrestling or for ACW. I would have preferred for things to have stayed going here. But as it turned out, I ended up working every summer in England for the next however many years. So, and that's when it was busy here, but that's also when it's busy in England. So I wouldn't have been working here anyway. I would have chose England. So it's unfortunate, and a lot of guys, their career basically ended along with those. A lot of guys wrestle only part time after that, and that's unfortunate. But it is what it is. I didn't lose any sleep over it.
You mentioned ACW closed with Bobby Bass owing a bunch of wrestlers the money. Does he still owe them today, or did you ever get your money?
No, never got a cent. No, and it pisses me off that the guys are down at that fucking cauliflower alley Mark Club, shaking hands with him and having beers with him. Fuck him. Nobody should speak to that man. Everybody knows that he fucked a whole crew of wrestlers. He should be ostracized from our community. But these guys in their little fucking in their little Mark convention, they seem way too forgiving.
September 2002. Was that the first time you went overseas
To
to
wrestle,
wrestle?
yes.
Yes. Had you gone over before, not to wrestle? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Who did you go over to wrestle for, and how did that come about?
Well, early in spring or early summer of 2002, Joe Legend gave me a call, and he was working for a promoter called Orig Williams. And Orig at the time was doing a tribute show. It was a WWE tribute show, like Beatlemania. So his top four, his semi-main event and the main event would be WWE tribute guys. He had a fake Rock, a fake Undertaker, a fake Kane, and a couple fake guys, the most convincing gold dust you've ever seen. So they called me, Joe Legend called me and he said, "Do you think you could pull off a fake Triple H gimmick?" And at the time I had long hair and so did Triple H. And we had similar builds, I would say, at the time. I'm a little taller. And I said, "Fuck yeah, I'll do it." And the money was brilliant. So that's what I was going to do. I was going to go in September and do a 3 week tour as the fake Triple H. They were going to call me Triple X in in Ireland. So as that got closer, and I had no, people were saying, "Oh, you're actually going to do a rip." I don't care. The whole business is bent. What's the difference? Pay me. I'll go be Cinderella. Doesn't matter to me. So with a few weeks to go, the promoter Orig had called me and he said, "We don't want you to do Triple H now. Do you think you could pull off Hulk Hogan?" I said, "Well, I have hair. I'm not shaving my head." He said, "Well, you have long blonde hair." He says, "Just wear a red bandana." He says, "Get some red tights and just do that with the crowd and do a leg drop." He says, "That's all you have to do." I said, "Well, what about money?" And he gave me a little more money to do Hogan. So I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." So they didn't call me Hulk Hogan. They called me Hollywood because that's what he was wrestling as, Hollywood Hogan at the time. So they called me Hollywood. I grew a big bleached handlebar mustache. I went out and I did that to the crowd, dropped a leg, and made the most money I'd ever made by a long shot for I think it was a 2.5 week tour. And then I came home and got married. And I was supposed to leave. We got married. I came home on Friday, got married on Saturday. Was supposed to fly to Scotland to do the same thing for 3 weeks on Monday, but he called on Sunday and said Vince McMahon is suing us. We can't do the tributes anymore. He says, "But I'm going to regroup." He said, "You'll be back ASAP, just as whatever you want to work as." So then I came back as Brody Steele, I don't know, a couple months later, and then I had a long career with Org without doing the tributes. But the tribute was the opening of the door for me.
How many years did you spend going back and forth between here and England and Scotland, Ireland, and all the other countries?
2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is when I stopped full time. So 8 years of regular trips. Probably what I used to do is I would generally go over the last week of January and stay till the middle of March. And then I'd go back again in May and stay right through to September. Then I'd go home for a few weeks and then do all of October and all of November. So I'd be home for all of December and half of January, and for a little while before summer and a little while before fall. So probably about 8 months a year I'd be over there for 7 or 8 of those years.
And you worked probably 7 days a week. What? Oh,
What?
sorry. I don't know what that was.
A text just came
Oh,
in on
okay.
my phone.
I thought that was my end. I was like, "What's the buzz?" And you guys worked full time when you were over there, like 7 days a week, pretty much.
Oh God, yeah, never a day off. I remember in 2003, we did 125 or something nights in a row, and I was with Brian Danielson was with me at the time. We were rooming together, and we used to do a double shot every Thursday. So it was 8 shows a week for like little over 4 months straight. We were dying, and we had 2 days off in a row. And I remember we were looking at the calendar, thinking, okay, only a few more weeks and we have 2 days off. And they flew by so fast. We didn't do anything. We never left the house, just ordered pizzas and sat back and relaxed and tried to let our bodies recover.
You just mentioned Daniel Bryan. Or Brian Danielson back then. You also worked with a guy that went to WWE, Mason Ryan. You worked with Sheamus and Wade Barrett. Is that correct?
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on those guys back then? Did you think they would make it as big as they did?
I thought Sheamus would because he has a unique look. And those guys, Sheamus and Wade Barrett, never worked full time for us. They had full time jobs. They were weekend warriors. So we would see them once in a while. The longest we would see them is for 3 or 4 shows, and then you wouldn't see them for weeks. So Wade Barrett, we laughed when he got signed. I didn't think he'd make a penny because he was terrible, but he got good, and he got a great gimmick. He ended up being. We used to try to give him the mic just to help him learn. It was so bad that it would ruin the show, and then he ended up being one of the best in the business on the mic. So he came into his own long after his time with us. Now Sheamus was green, but he was so big and he looked so different that when he got signed and he didn't know whether. I remember when he got his deal, he hummed and hawed on the road, wondering, they're offering me nothing. And I think he was working as a chartered accountant at the time, so he was making a really good living. So he was like, do I give up $150,000 a year to go work for $500 a week? But he ended up being a millionaire. It worked out.
Did you think Daniel Bryan, Brian Danielson, would become the most popular wrestler in the world? No.
No, I never thought he'd ever make WWE. And not that I didn't think he should have. I just didn't think that he had the look that Vince would ever give a chance to. I thought he might make it there for a short time as a tag team or something, but I honestly didn't think that he would ever have the kind of success that he did. I'm so glad that he did because I mean, he's one of the greatest guys. He's one of the smallest guys that I've ever had to be able to have a believable match with because he's so good. He can make it look like he can beat me. Usually when I work a guy that size, I mean, I get no choice. I just eat him up. But with him, we'd go out and, he'd nail me at those forearms for 25 minutes, and people would believe that he was tougher than me. It was awesome.
And he was probably half the size then that he is now. He's still not very big.
Yeah, I'd say he was about the same size. Maybe in better shape, to be honest with you. He seemed to be soft in WWE, I thought.
He tried to get bigger, I think.
Yeah, maybe. He seemed more lean when he was with us. That maybe made him look a little bigger.
Was there much of a culture shock for you going overseas for the first time? Like in staying there for months at a time? Did you have to get used to it?
Yeah, I adapt pretty quick traveling, so no, the culture shock was no problem. I loved the guys. It was the best crew that there was nobody was a mark. I mean, nobody talked about wrestling ever. You get in a car and you travel for 5 hours and you talk about politics or the right in my wheelhouse. I loved it. There was I remember when I got there for my first tour, I was picked up and we were leaving from Rhyl, North Wales, to a ferry in northwest Wales called Holyhead, where the city's called Holyhead, and you take the ferry into Dublin. So that's how we were getting from Wales to Dublin. And I remember being picked up in the middle of the night. Frankie Sloan was in the car, a Welsh guy named Boston Blackie, another Welsh guy named Geraint War, and a young boy named Steve Hamilton. And I remember me thinking, I just finished wrestling 100 nights in a row with ACW. I'm a veteran. and I had a few years in, and I had quite a few matches. I didn't have a lot of financial success, but I made a living, and I was pretty experienced. And then within about half of the ride, I think it was about a 3 hour ride to Holyhead, I realized, what I just done for the last 100 days, these guys have been doing for 10 years. Frankie Sloan was working 350 times a year for 10 years at that point. There was no such thing as a tour for him. He woke up in the morning and he went to a town and wrestled. That's what he did every single day. So I realized these guys, experience wise, are in a completely different league than me. And I think because of that, it has a really, it lends to a really good atmosphere at the shows and backstage. These guys are family. They live together, literally.
In 2003, I ran the first Maritime Cup. I contacted you to do the show, but you were booked overseas. What did you think when you heard that I was going to run a show?
I can't remember, Harold, to be honest with you. I guess I thought, good for you.
Yeah.
I don't think that I really thought too much about it. I was glad that the guys were getting a show. I knew what the crew was going to be. I thought it would be a good show. I was hoping you'd draw,
Yeah.
but I don't think I put a lot of thought into it. And I'm sorry to say.
No, that's fine. I'm basically asking, like, me with no experience doing anything, that I was going to run a show was.
But no, by that time I'd met you. I respected you, and I knew that you would listen to people.
Yeah.
You had Mike Hughes involved and Bobby Roode. And, if you needed any help, those guys were going to certainly chip in.
Oh yeah, Mike was helped. The show wouldn't have probably happened if it wasn't for Mike Hughes' help, or it would have been completely different and bad if it wasn't for Mike Hughes' help.
Yeah.
Um, in 2004, you started a wrestling school with Duke McIsaac, Cowboy Mike Hughes, and Gary Williams. What are your memories of that?
Um,
That's where you trained Dice and Zero.
how many memories is that? Where, what? Oh, here in New Brunswick.
Yeah, it was in that big metal
Right, yeah.
warehouse building barn thing.
Gary was involved with that?
Yeah, I think so.
No, I think it was just me and Mike.
Was it? There's a picture of you, Mike, Duke, and Gary.
Yeah, I think Gary came up for a weekend or something
Okay.
and helped train some of the guys.
That was probably the weekend I was there then.
It was me and Mike invested the money.
Yeah.
Me and Mike had both built that ring. Oh, we ran that school to pay for that ring. So we built that ring, which ended up being the wrestling reality ring, and we needed to find it. So we ran a wrestling school to basically pay for the ring and to make a few bucks on our own. We started out with about 10 or 12 students, ended up with maybe 2 or something, which is the way. But they all paid in full, so it was a good little venture. And Duke was just in limbo. He was, I think Duke was getting ready to go to England for his first tour, and he wasn't really doing anything. So I asked him to come up and to help train. Help. I wasn't going to pay him or anything, but I'd let him stay at my house, and he could get some in-ring time and help train the new students. So that was his involvement. And he stayed at my house for about 3 days, and on the third day he asked me why I didn't wake him up earlier. And I said, because I'm not your fucking father. And then he spent the rest of the time in the hotel room with all the trainees.
You eventually got Duke booked in England. Was that around that time, or was that later?
Yeah, I think that was that year.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that was 2000. It might have been the next year. It might have been 2005.
Where am I here? You went to Puerto Rico in early 2005. There was rumors that you had like some type of heart attack or panic attack or something along those lines. Do you remember that?
It must have been a panic attack because when I flew home right away, and I'll be honest, I was running hard in those days. I was partying a lot. I had opened up a store, a protein and clothing store in Moncton, so that was stressful. I was wrestling a very, very, very full schedule. Training, I was just wasn't looking after myself really. I wasn't getting any sleep, and it was just a stressful time in my life. And I remember when we were flying down to Puerto Rico, I was flying with Mike, and I told him, like, I really don't feel right. There's something wrong with me. And that night, they diagnosed it as a heart attack. The guys doing the CPR on me, the paramedics, but I refused to go to the hospital because I thought that in Puerto Rico they'd stick me with like a $10,000 bill.
Yeah.
So I waited till the morning. I flew home and I got my test. I went to a cardiologist and they said there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. But my doctor suggested to take a bit of a break, and I just relaxed and I was fine shortly after.
In early 2005, Wrestling with Reality at that point shot its first TV pilot using the Second Maritime Cup as the show in Kentville. When did the idea for WWR come about, and how did Dave Hockey get involved?
Okay, that was probably a year previous. I was going to start a full-time wrestling promotion right around the time that I opened up my shop. I was making good money at the time. I thought if I'm going to invest some money into a wrestling promotion. So, but I didn't want to do weekends. I wanted to do it 7 nights a week. So, Rick Doyle at the time was running a successful vending business, and Rick, I'd become friends with Rick, and I respected his business knowledge. So I invited him up to Moncton. We sat down for a few days and we crunched every number we could think of. I was also in contact with Mike Hughes on the phone. He wasn't going to invest financially, but it was basically going to be my money, and me and Rick were gonna run it. And the more we crunched the numbers, the more we realized it just isn't viable. It's nice to think of, but I just don't think it can be done. And I think it's been proven time and time again by people that do run tours here that it can't be done. Not successfully. It can be done and you can stay alive. I don't want to stay alive. I want to make money. So if I was going to make less money to run a promotion in the Maritimes than I would wrestling in England, it just didn't make sense to me. So I told Rick, I said, I can't invest in something that's not going to make money. The best we can do, and I remember the number, 226. You had to draw 226 people 7 nights a week. That you couldn't go lower than that. That's impossible to do. Because you're going to run into your Lunenburgs and Bridgewaters where you might only get 50 people, and then you're fucked. So it wasn't a risk I was willing to take. But we had already started because we thought that we needed TV. So, that was part of our business plan. And so I had contacted a lot of television, including TSN. And the Fight Network had started, actually they hadn't started yet, but they were in the initial stages. So the CEO of the company was Brian Sobey. So I had a couple of discussions with him. I just wanted live wrestling on TV. And it seemed like TSN dismissed us immediately because they had WWE was on their network at the time. But everyone I spoke to, they weren't really. Sorry, yeah, low battery. You there?
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone I spoke to, they weren't really interested in wrestling, but they were interested in wrestlers. So they would immediately shut down the business conversation, but they'd want to stay on the phone and say so. And then it's like, oh, so you're a wrestler, eh? Have you met such and such? What countries have you been to? What's that like? Is it cool? And it's kind of stuff that I found annoying at the time. But as time passed, I remember calling Rick one day and I said, everybody's interested in what we do outside of the ring, in the fact that we are a wrestler. They don't want to watch wrestling, but they think it's cool that these Cro-Magnon men travel the world with tights on and make money. I said, maybe there's something in that. And as we we ended up, I remember my wife at the time my wife, she would say, like, you're talking to your girlfriend again? Because me and Rick were on the phone so often, just trying to figure out where can we go with this. And reality TV was starting to get popular then. So I said, the question kind of answered itself. Well, let's just do a reality spin on it. Then I called Brian Sobey back, and he was immediately interested. We basically had a verbal deal that day. So it was just it wasn't my intention to do it. It's just the only way that we could get on TV and make money. I mean, you could do whatever Wrestle Center's doing to lose money, but we wanted to make money.
And how did Dave Hockey get involved? Where did he come from?
Well, that was well. That actually that was well, we didn't know any TV producers, you know. So
Right.
he lives in Rick Doyle's town, and Rick had met him somehow.
Yeah.
So he said, "I know a guy who sort of does TV, and he does. He was doing TV commercials for CBC for the chicken union. There's a chicken farm down there, and he did some kind of union commercials. So he was the only guy we knew in TV. So he did our first pilot, and he was just such a jackass. We couldn't continue working with him. Then when I tried to, and then we got Sarah Dunsworth. So. And Sarah did great stuff with us and opened a lot of doors for us. But when it came time to getting a broadcast license, she wasn't credentialed enough as a producer or director for us to get our funding through Telefilm and NB Film. So they refused to fund us unless we had a more credentialed producer. So I had to call Sarah and say, we either have to reduce your role or I have to find somebody else because we can't get funding. And she said, well, she says, to be honest, I'm kind of busy anyway. And she just stepped away from the whole thing. And NB Film had already, they had already suggested Greg Hemmings because he was the the rising star around here. So I called him right away and we made a deal immediately, you know, gave him 33%. Or actually, I think he had a better deal than that. So it was 40% for him and 30% for Rick and I, something like that. He had a little better stake. Not that it made a lot of money in the end. It made a lot of difference, but yeah. So that was the entire journey of that.
The second Wrestling with Reality taping happened in Canning in October or November of 2005. The main event of that match was a tag match. It was Steen and Duke, I think, against you and Gary. Steen kicked out of the finish of that match. What are your memories of that?
I don't really remember. I remember being mad at him. That was this. You know, I don't really. I don't even remember what the finish was. All I remember was being backstage yelling at him, and Buddy Lane yelling at him too. I remember Buddy Lane saying, "You just kicked out of the boss's finish, you fucking jabroni."
in Early in 2005, or possibly late 2004, you had a falling out with Cowboy Mike Hughes, which you guys later talked about on Wrestling Reality. During the summer of 2005, there was a tour run that ended up being one show. You were overseas at the time. During the first and only show of the tour, there ended up being a lot of blood spilled on your canvas. What you weren't happy about that? What are your memories of that?
I just remember not being happy about it. You know? And I
I have
remember
a funny story
saying
about
to
that.
them like, "This is my fucking canvas, which costs like $500. You didn't do it as part of an angle that was ever going to make a fucking penny. I think it wasn't it Vinny Glide or somebody that bled.
Vinny, Steen, and Rick. Yeah.
Yeah. So something that was never going to make a fucking penny. So you've cost me a $500 mask, or at the very least a cleaning for something that's never going to make a penny. And even more so, I wasn't even part of the promotion, so I was never going to make a fucking cent. So yeah, I was pissed off. It was just it seemed to me something that backyarders would do. But I forgave them all.
um, Speaking of that ring, I meant to ask this one earlier. That ring was 18 by 18. Um, why did you make your ring bigger than general independent wrestling rings, which were usually 16 by 16 or sometimes even smaller?
Because I think for TV, because we had planned like we had with the wrestling reality tours with TV, where you have the big surrounding pillars with the lights. What people see when they first walk into an arena is a ring. So I wanted a really flashy ring, and to me, bigger. I prefer a 16-foot ring for live events, but for a TV event, I think, especially from the fans' perspective, and we were running big arenas too. So it just a bigger ring looked better. I don't think it helps the work any. It kind of makes the matches look a little slow, but that was my thought process. It was Mike that made the ring actually.
Yeah. Okay, back to that tour. What do you remember about when hearing your ring was left on the side of the road in the truck, which was later found by Vinny Glide, I think?
I was pissed off. I just felt disrespected. And I know that the guys were pissed off and all that, and they had their reasons, but I didn't fuck them. And, it's still my ring. That I sold that ring to Brendan Paul a few years ago for like 5 grand. So that's a lot of money to just leave on the side of the road that's not yours.
Right.
So I just thought the guys were acting like fucking kids.
I remember this was back in the days of MSN, the chat program. I
Uh,
remember you signing on and you changed your name to Who Bled on My Canvas. And that's when everybody freaked out.
I don't
um,
remember that.
um, Later in 2005, early 2006, IHW booked some shows with the same guy that did the failed Pro Wrestling United tour. That's the tour that had your ring left on the side of the road. At that time, because they booked those shows with that guy, you said you'd never work with them again and you would never give those guys work again. What are your memories of that?
None. I don't remember that at all.
Never remember
I
that?
believe that's something I would. That sounds like something I would say, but I have no recollection of it whatsoever.
Thoughts on what IHW has become now? Did you think they would become what they are now back then?
No, I thought they were pathetic when it started, but they seem to have done things right. That they never lost money. They just continued to slowly build up their product, and right now I think they've got the second best product in the Maritimes.
First being Red Rock, is that?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, just making sure that I wasn't missing something. Um, in June 2006, myself, along with Sarah Dunsworth, ran the third Maritime Cup. You were supposed to be in the main event of that, but I think you tore your bicep first, and you
pack.
called Peck, okay, and you said that you couldn't do it. And then I eventually think I talked you into just getting eliminated early in the main event, but then you like hurt your hamstring or something.
Oh no, it was the opposite.
It was the opposite?
I had torn my hamstring, and
Right.
that's when I said I couldn't do it. And then I tore my pec in the gym a few days later, or a week or two later.
Right. Well, what are your memories? You told me then that that was the first show you had ever gone to that you weren't booked to wrestle on. What are your memories of that night?
I thought it was a fantastic show. Well, I was involved in some way, wasn't I? Didn't I?
You were a manager for Bobby and Gary.
Right, right. Yeah, I thought it was a great show. If memory serves me, it was packed. I thought it was a fantastic show. Yeah, I was very impressed with it.
A few months later, in August of 2006, me, Sarah, you, and Rick ran another show at the Halifax Forum. That was the first night that you and Mike had got back together since your falling out. Memories of that?
That was a great night. Great night. Yeah, if memory serves me, me and Mike were probably in no condition to be involved in a wrestling show because we were out back partying, and then we had to go sit in the crowd and watch the main event. So
I
yeah,
think you were both injured too. Like you were still recovering from both yours, and I think he tore his quad or something or
oh,
other.
I can't remember with him. I know I was still injured.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if I'd had my surgery that yet, or yeah, I must have. But yeah, it was a no, that was a great night. I think that was another turning point of maritime wrestling that wasn't capitalized on. The first one was Kurgan turning heel in 2001. That wasn't capitalized on. 2006 at that show, we'd said, remember them chanting Cardinal Sinners when me and Mike were sitting in the seat,
Oh yeah.
and we got involved in the match, and they kind of shit on Gary because we were still the cool heels. I think we could have booked a tour after that and probably done something, but just another missed opportunity. Or you could have booked a tour.
That was the night we hung Gary over the top rope
That's
in the
right. Yeah.
noose, and you punched Sarah Dunsworth.
Yeah.
What are your memories of the reaction you guys got?
Hanging Gary was a great reaction. The punching Sarah wasn't the reaction I'd hoped for. Maybe we'd gone a little too far.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 years ago people weren't ready to see a woman get hit by a 300-pound man.
Yeah.
She sold it well. She did
Oh, she
great.
did. Yeah. And you talked about this earlier, but in 2007, you signed a deal with the Fight Network to air Wrestling Reality. You mentioned how that came about, but what are your thoughts on the roster that you used and the final product that aired, and why did you bring in James Mason out of anyone you could have brought in?
Um, The reality shows were top notch. I thought that they were fantastic. The actual wrestling shows, the crew, it was okay. I mean, James Mason is great. Mike Hughes is great. Gary's great. I'm big. You know, the other guys were really green at the time. Even Titus was a shell of what he is now. You know, he was okay, but he wasn't really good then. Tommy Osborne, we tried. We you know, part of the storyline was that he was the great up and coming. He wasn't. He was okay at that at best. Scott Savage was horrendous. Zero was green. Sidewinder was terrible. The girls were terrible. So I mean, it wasn't a great crew by any stretch, but I thought they were decent shows. I think that we made sure that the shows ended very strong, so the crowds were happy. The crowds were big, but the reality show was very good, I thought.
Memories of working with Greg Hemmings?
Great. He's one of the most positive, driven, professional people I've ever met in my life. He's still a good friend to this day.
Memories of going on Off the Record with Michael Landsberg?
That was a good experience, a really good experience. We were really busy because we'd done like 5 TV shows in that day. So we were just going from studio to studio. It was really good. It was a fun experience. He's a nice guy, Landsberg. He
Isn't
gave me
there?
an invitation. I can anytime I'm in Toronto. He says he just book call him the day before, and I'm booked in the next day.
Awesome.
But I'm never in
Um,
Toronto, and it doesn't pay.
wasn't there? There's a story that you guys were following Chris Jericho around every show he did. You were on right before or right after.
I only saw him at the Off the Record set, so I don't know if we were following him around. That's the first I heard of it. All I remember seeing him as I saw him at the green room before we went on and Off the Record. That was the only interaction I had with him.
In 2008, I think 2008 or 2009, you guys filmed the second season called Cardinal Sinners. It was much different than the first season. Your thoughts on the product that aired with that show?
I wasn't fussy about it. It was okay. I thought that the first one was better, and it was nobody's fault. It's just that more cool stuff happened. I liked being in the Maritimes for the first one. I liked that we had more cameras on us all the time. I liked that people were comfortable with the surroundings, and we had some, green newcomers, and I just think it worked better for whatever reason. The second season was kind of junked up, where we do a couple days here, and then 2 weeks later do another couple days. There was something about the flow of a crew of guys being together for 6 days and 6 shows that, it was real. And that's what I always wanted the show to be, is what it's really like being on the road as a professional wrestler.
Why was there no third season?
No money. No, we never had an offer that made sense.
Would
Yes,
you do another third season, or would you do a third season if it made sense, if an offer came?
absolutely. I'd start tomorrow if the offer came, if it was a good offer. And I talk to Greg about it every once in a while, and we have lots of ideas, but it's been pitched, and like I say, there's not a lot of money to be made in that. The offers that we've got just haven't made sense for us to. I would have loved. Me and Mike are working in India now. I think that would be a perfect place to do one,
Yeah.
but there'd probably be a lot of red tape there.
Yeah, I'll just hop in a suitcase and film, and we'll put it
Yeah.
together. In 2009, Mike Hughes started Red Rock Wrestling. Your thoughts on when you heard that he was going to start up a promotion based solely in Prince Edward Island?
I was happy. Yeah, and I thought at this point because, like I said, Mike. By that point, Mike was in his 30s. He learned a lot. He had become by that point the best wrestler in the Maritimes, and I've heard you ask this question to people, and if anybody who's asked who the best wrestler is in the Maritimes that doesn't say Mike Hughes doesn't have an opinion worth a pinch of fucking shit. Because he's a million times better than second place. And second place is irrelevant because he forgot more than all of us put together. He's the best in the ring. He's the best psychology. He's the safest. He's drawn the most money. Well, besides me, I've drawn more money, but he is better than me.
Did you think Red Rock Wrestling then would become what it is now?
No, oh no, but I knew it would be successful, but I didn't know how successful because he was just, he hadn't worked much as a babyface. So, he started when Red Rock Wrestling started. He started as a heel, and I think. But I remember his first night as a babyface, and it looked a little bit awkward. And I thought, Jesus, but he really caught on. He's a great babyface now.
I remember seeing the clip of him. I've never seen him work babyface before, and I wasn't at the show, but I seen a clip of it the next day, and he was coming out shaking people's hands, and I was like, "This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen."
Arm
It
drags
looks
and the
so
whole
strange.
works.
Yeah. Around this time, you also started working for Mainstream Wrestling and Ultimate Championship Wrestling, who you'd never worked for before. Why did you start working with them at this time? Especially Mainstream, who you said you'd never ever work with Devin
Well,
Shinnick.
because they paid me. They paid me well, and I don't know. Had I said that I would never work for them?
Yeah, back in the day, 2001, 2002, like I talked about in Devin's interview, it was a big thing between real action wrestling and mainstream
Oh,
wrestling.
see, I don't remember
None of
that.
you guys liked Devin. He was like the worst thing on the planet for professional wrestling.
Yeah, I really don't remember that to be honest with you. But yeah, I did two shows for Devin, I think, and two shows for Chuck. So wouldn't say I started working for them. I happened to be off on a Friday night, and they called me and said, "Will you work?" And I said, "This is my wage," and they said, "Okay." And I went down, and so it wasn't like I was starting an endeavor with them.
Right.
Now I did say when I worked the two shows for Chuck that I can't work for him anymore, and I won't work for him anymore. But I would work for Devin. As a matter of fact, Devin offered me. I think I'm going to say it's this weekend or next month or something. I turned him down because I was already booked, but he offered me something in Spryfield, and I turned him down, and I think it was for Chuck as well. But no, I won't work for Chuck because I don't respect him personally. But I like Devin, so I'd work for Devin if the opportunity was there. You know,
Yeah,
the money was and everything. I know that they run a low budget, and what they do spend, they try to spend on bigger names, and I respect that.
yeah. Chuck's the promoter and Devin's the booker for that
Yeah.
company now.
In that case, I won't be working for them.
um, your memories of working for East Coast Pro Wrestling and working guys like Val Venus and Billy Gunn in Cape Breton?
I liked working those shows. I liked how big the crowds were. I like that Sheldon, even though he had no background in wrestling, he was a born promoter. That guy he must have carny ancestry or something. He's a natural promoter. He knows that the object of the game is to make fucking money. It's not to get selfies. It's not to get Facebook likes and Instagram followers. It's to make money.
That's not the
So
most important part.
and you can tell the seriousness of a promoter by the look of his merchandise table.
Hmm.
You walk out there and you see a lot of dollar store items for sale for $5 that appeal to children. That's a smart promoter.
Yeah,
You're not WWE action figures aren't where the fucking money is. The money is with trinkets that you sell to children for 500% profit.
yeah.
And and that's how he was. And he drove a hard bargain. Sheldon wouldn't call you and say, whatever you want, this is what you get. He would call and offer you a wage.
Yeah.
And you would negotiate, and you'd meet somewhere in the middle, and I like that. I respect that. So yeah, I hope that he promotes again. I hope that he's okay.
Yeah, 2005 to 2010, Mainstream Wrestling ran long tours of Newfoundland and Labrador, some of them 30 days straight. Were you ever contacted to do any of those?
No, no, I was way out of their price range. I was really busy in those. I was making real money overseas. And they knew that. And me and Mike had fallen out for part of that. But
Yeah.
Mike's career had been faltering at that point. I'd say during those when he left Puerto Rico in 2005, from 2006 until he started Red Rock, he really didn't have much going on. So I think he was in a position where he had to take tours like that. But I had things rocking really good then. So, no, I was never contacted, but Devin knew what kind of money I was asking for, and I would say his whole crew was making that.
In 2010, you worked for Devin at the Maritime Wrestling Expo with Bret the Hitman Hart. At that point, Bret Hart was probably the biggest name that was ever brought here. What are your memories of that expo and that show?
I thought it was a failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was entertaining for the people to see Bret Hart, and they probably had a good night of wrestling, but financially I thought it was a dismal failure. And I've never spoken to Devin about it, but I'm sure he'd agree. There's no way that fucking thing made money.
Did you think that it would?
No,
No.
no.
You later did some tours of Newfoundland with Legend City Wrestling and Newfoundland Pro Wrestling. What are your memories of those?
Love them. Love wrestling in Newfoundland. Again, there was no money made. You know, the crowds weren't big enough to sustain it, and I think history has proven that. But I love wrestling in Newfoundland. I love being in Newfoundland. It's like the last bastion of early Western civilization. You know, they'll ruin it soon enough, but right now, Newfoundland is still Newfoundland, and that's rare for. There's nowhere else in Canada you can go where you can say, okay, this is really similar to what it was like 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
Do you get along with the promoter of Legend City Wrestling, Dan? I can't pronounce his last name.
Bjorkdahl, no, I can't stand him.
No. Well, how come?
He lied to me. He offered me a tour that I accepted, and I canceled. I didn't cancel anything because I was free, but I had some other opportunities come up for those same dates that I said, well, no, I can't because I'll be in Newfoundland for Dan. And then about a week before the tour, I contacted him. I said, have you bought my plane ticket yet? He goes, well, no, we're over budget. I'm going to have to keep you off of this one. So I called him a fat little fucking Barney Rubble lookalike and told him I'd never work for him again. I haven't. I haven't spoken to him. No, that's not true. I have spoken to him because Mike booked him in PEI and he was there for a couple shows. But I said hello to him. That was it. Don't like him. I'll never work for him. And probably given the right amount of alcohol and conditions, I'd probably knock his teeth down his throat.
In 2014, I put up the poster for the first ever Wrestle Center show. You contacted me to find out what the IFWA was. I didn't know. I still don't actually know. But I gave you Jason's contact info. What were your initial conversations with him like?
I can't remember, to be honest with you. And I can't remember if I contacted him or he contacted me. But if I asked you for his contact, I must have contacted him. But I really don't remember. I remember that we came to a deal very quickly, and that was it. And I went down and I did a few shows for them.
Okay. What are your memories of working with Wrestle Center and the idea that they pitched of you working a retirement angle with Gary?
No, I was okay with the angle. I didn't like working for them. I didn't find it fun. You know, at this stage of the game, you know, although I preach that it's about money, and it always has been about money, but you know, I'm getting close to the end of my career. I'll be 49 later this year. You know, I really want to enjoy my work atmosphere now, and there was nothing about that backstage or anything about the show that's enjoyable. Jason is an unpleasant person. Tyler's a mark. Half of his crew are marks that really they're apprentice wrestlers that should just sit and keep their mouths shut, and they don't. I don't like their business plan. I just didn't enjoy working for what they think they're Vince McMahon, and you know they're not. You know they're not even Devin Chittick. You know, and I don't mean that as an insult to Devin Chittick. Devin Chittick knows that he's trying to run small shows and make money.
Yeah.
They're trying to run big shows knowing they're going to lose money. So Devin Chittick is much smarter than them. But, you know, I don't mean that because I like Devin. I really don't mean that to come off as an insult. But, no, I didn't. There's nothing about working for them that I enjoyed. I like to, you know, besides having the first few minutes where I get to chat with you and Gary and stuff like that, you know, and then you guys get tiresome after a few minutes too. So.
I'm surprised we lasted that long.
But no, I found everybody was stressed. I wasn't because I didn't give a fuck. But other people being stressed around me, knowing that they feel like they're in there fighting for the job every time they get in a ring, you know, and being told to do things that are completely unnatural. Don't be a heel. Don't be a babyface. Be yourself. Well, these guys have been themselves for 30 years and haven't drawn a fucking dime. You know, people don't pay to watch them mow their lawn as themselves. Pro wrestling is about being characters. So, when you get two guys that know nothing trying to tell people what to do and rudely, they were never rude to me in fairness, but they treated the other guys really badly, and I just didn't want to be involved in it. So they they didn't book me on a particular show, which I didn't care. I don't expect to be booked on every show, and they probably think that's why I stopped working for them. But I just I didn't think that I didn't think that I didn't feel like working for them anymore. That's the simplest way to put it. So I sent them an email, and there was another thing. Tyler called me one night and he asked me, "What do you think about Riddick Stone?" He says, "I'm thinking about firing him." I said, "Well, I think Riddick's great as a heel." I said, "As a babyface, I think you're asking a lot of him, especially in that market. That's a heel market. I don't think that Riddick will get over as a babyface." He calls Riddick and says, "Yeah, Peter says you're the shits." So Riddick, he didn't confront me because he knew it was bullshit because we're friends. So he at an IHW show, he says, "Tyler told me that you said I was the shits." And I told him exactly what happened. He said, "Well, that's what I figured." He said, "Anyway, I told him I quit." And that day, we did a show, and I came home that night and I sent them an email and I said, "I will never work for you guys again." And that's the last contact I've had with them.
There's been a lot of back and forth online between Tyler, Jason, and yourself. Your thoughts on that?
I'm just having fun. I don't give a fuck. I really don't care. I have no dog in the fight whatsoever. My career's almost over. I've had fun. I've made a ton more money than they will ever make. I hope that I can make more than they'll lose. From now on, that's my benchmark. If I can make more money this year than they lose, then I'll have a good year. No, I don't give a shit. I'm just having fun. I job with people all the time. I argue with my best friends on the internet. I enjoy it. I could sit down and have a civil conversation with any of them on any topic, but not about wrestling because they don't know. They don't know anything about wrestling. This is my profession. It's not theirs.
Thoughts on how they run their shows? They run them as a TV show and not a wrestling show.
Have you seen the TV show?
I haven't. No, it doesn't play on anything that I have for some
Well,
reason.
well, watch it sometime and tell me what you think of it.
All right. um,
Maybe they should start running as a wrestling show.
would you go back?
No,
No.
no.
Uh, you now work in Halifax for Twin City Wrestling (TCW). Thoughts on working for them?
I enjoy it. I hope that it can get to the point that they can find a venue that's more viable because I don't think it's possible to make money at the Halifax Forum, unfortunately, with wrestling in the position it's in right now. I mean, those Mick Foley shows and stuff that had what 600-700 people, they still lost money and a lot of money. So no, I like the atmosphere. I like the crew. Of course, there could be things that are improved. I mean, basically, everyone that was worth anything in Wrestle Center is there now, except for Steve Arsenal and Marcus Burke, and I suspect that they'll eventually be there too.
Yeah, they're not with Wrestle Center anymore either.
No.
So, on the last TCW show, you were in a tag match, you and Mike against the American Patriot and Lincoln Steen again. You got really mad at Steen during that match. What happened?
I think I make Steen nervous.
You've had two tag matches with them. Neither one of them have gone well.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, I end up looking like the cunt because they think that the experienced guy is always in control, but I can't control when he forgets everything, and freezes like a deer caught in the headlights. I love Steen. I think he's a great worker, but him and I have never been. I've only been in the ring with him a few times, and it's never clicked. So we're just we're like oil and water, I guess.
You recently had an IHW match with Tommy Starr. What are your thoughts on him and that match?
He's a nice guy.
Okay. Earlier this year, you took the wrestling world by storm over in India. How did that booking come about?
I had been contacted for quite some time by Jinder Mahal, whose real name is Raj Desi, and I didn't know who he was. So he had sent me a few messages on Facebook, and I never read them until finally I looked in And you know how you see the first like heading of the first bit of the message?
Hmm.
It said, "Please read this message." So I thought, okay, I'll read it. And he was telling me that he was serious about the offer in India and that they need a big guy to work with Kali. So I contacted him right away, and I said, "Sorry that I'm late getting back to you." But anyway, we was connected on WhatsApp, and we spoke there a few times, and he put me in contact with Kali, and I had a few good conversations with him, and we figured out what I could bring to the table and what they wanted. And yeah, we just went from there. Had constant contact and made sure all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed, and put a good deal together. And you know, I expected that we'd go over there and get. I was hoping for 3 to 5 thousand people. I was fucking shocked by the crowds we got. You know, I will. It'll probably be the highlight of my career, no matter what happens from here on.
What was the biggest crowd? Was like 60,000 people?
I think 65. I'd heard as much as 70, but I think people are settling on 65.
That's crazy. Yeah. Were you always their first choice to work that angle with Kali?
No, no. I think it was Mason Ryan, but then he got his job with Cirque du Soleil.
Right, I knew that. Yeah.
So he became unavailable, and then they contacted me. Now, that's what Raj told me originally. Now he says no, that I was the first choice, but he's just trying to make me feel good.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if I was their 100th choice. I'm the one who got there, and I'm the one that made the money, and I'm the one that helped draw the houses, and I'm the one going back.
Did you kind of mentioned this earlier, but did you expect the type of attention it got both inside and outside of the country?
No, no, no. I expected it would be a good tour and a profitable tour. I remember Colt Cabana contacted me a few weeks before. He said, "Don't go." He says it's a shithole. And Frankie Sloan contacted me. He said, "Don't go." He says, "I spent 3 weeks there one time." He says, "I still haven't recovered." And I remember hearing about my friend Blackie was once there on his own for 3 months. And I remember him telling me when I used to travel in Ireland and Wales with him, you know, if you ever get a chance to go to India, don't go. So, you know, I went against everybody's better judgment, and I went. And although I did get horrendously sick, it was incredible, and I can't wait to go back.
When are you going back?
It's looking like June, but Callie's shooting a movie in Hollywood right now, so the planning is a little behind, so it might be pushed back a little more, and then probably again in the fall, maybe even twice.
Nice. You've wrestled in 18 countries, making a living wrestling around the world, not being on TV full time. Thoughts on the perception that you need to be a big TV star in wrestling to make a living?
Um, well, you almost do need to be. You know, I think I'm the last of a dying breed. There's very few. Colt Cabana would be an exception. He makes more money than I do, so he'd probably be the best person to ask. But he does a lot of his outside of the ring with his online stores and everything. You have to bring, and it's funny you mentioned Tommy Starr earlier, and I jokingly said he's a nice guy. He is a really nice guy,
Yeah.
and I think he's got potential as well if he can just get his body looking a little better and come up with a gimmick. I spoke to him earlier today. I've been helping him. I gave him a diet about a month ago and trying to get him in shape. I want to help him, and I told he was asking about overseas bookings, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but who cares if he minds? Uh, I told him you got to get color. You got to get a colorful gimmick, or be jacked, or be a monster. You got to bring something different, because these promoters are getting thousands of pictures a day. You got to be something different. So I told him to look into a gimmick, and I gave that same advice to somebody about a year and a half ago named Troy Merrick.
Yeah, that's my next
Look
question.
what the gimmick did for him. It changed his whole career and his life.
Your thoughts on what he's accomplished over there? He's going to be in there twice now?
Couldn't ask for it to happen to a nicer guy. And he probably floundered for his first 3 quarters of his career, but when he decided to get serious and make it a priority in the gym and learning the trade and looking the part and getting a gimmick that people can. The key is with live entertainment is to have a gimmick that people don't have to figure out. When you break the curtain, they should know immediately what's this guy all about. And an American gimmick with an American flag, your story's told. Everyone hates Americans outside of America. So, he went with that and it's working really well for him. I'm happy for him. I hope that he keeps going with it.
Who are some of the best wrestlers that you've worked that no one's ever heard of?
James Mason, uh, Robbie Brookside, Robbie Dynamite, Dean Allmark. Um, well, just about everyone in England, to be fair. A guy named Johnny Moss, from Northern England. He looks like a monster in pictures, but he's only probably 5'8", 5'9". I had a match with him in it doesn't matter where, some town in England, and I was very impressed with him. And he's over, and he's a world traveler that makes a lot of money that nobody's ever heard of. He's not on TV. James Mason would be the best, though. I would say Robbie Brookside, but everyone's heard of him now because he's with WWE.
Right.
But a couple of years ago, nobody around here ever heard of him.
You're very open about your political views and your religious views online. Why do you feel so strongly about the issues that you believe in?
Because I have a daughter, and I want her to have a decent world to live in when she grows up. And if our society continues on the path it is right now, she won't. So you have very few forks in the road in your life, and you have to make the right turns at the right forks. And there will come a time that all of our children will look us in the eye when society is in really bad shape, like it'll be in about 10 years if we don't change things quickly. And they're going to look us in the eye and say, Daddy, did you try to stop it? Did you try to help? What did you do? And I want to be able to look her in the eye and say, well, Daddy tried. Or, even better yet, Daddy fixed it.
Do you think with how you go about all of the comments and statuses and stuff you write online that that's a good way to go about it, or would you like to do it on a bigger platform?
I will do it on a bigger platform soon, and things are in the works. Okay. But yeah, all change begins with dialogue. Everything begins with dialogue. Germany had taken over, the Nazi Party had taken over Germany for 6 years before we got involved in war with them. We didn't just wake up one day and say, the Nazis have to go. There was a lot of discussion, and it started there was no such thing as the internet then, but it started on a grassroots level. It started in universities, it started in libraries, it started at kitchen tables. And if enough people start talking and understanding issues and understanding problems, then that's when big movements form. And there are big movements that are trying to take our country. I don't look at us as Western society is in big trouble right now. So there's a lot of movements that have formed, that are merging, that are that want our children to actually have free speech and freedoms and absolute equality between races and genders, and that's disappearing right now under the guise of the opposite. If you understand what I'm saying, people are trying to come across as social justice warriors that are out to help everybody. They're doing the opposite. They're shutting down free speech, and once free speech is gone, everything crumbles behind it. Why are we talking about politics?
I just wanted to throw that in there. That's something that you're really passionate about, and I figured I'd give a little bit of chance to explain why. A lot of people read your stuff online, so.
Yeah, a lot of people delete me, but and a lot of people try to argue with me. They lose immediately because I have the facts on my side. Right. But I also get dozens and dozens of messages of people thanking me, to opening their eyes to things that allows them to, or opens their mind enough to actually do some research, and they end up saying, you know what, you were right. And as you know, I'm anti-Islamic. I'm not anti-Muslim, but Islam is the worst idea in the history of mankind. And I have a lot of Muslim friends that agree with me. And they don't say it openly, but in private messages, thanking me because they don't want their daughter to be veiled and mutilated and stoned to death. A lot of people in the Middle East contact me and thank me, and people like me for actually opening up the dialogue. We might be a generation away from fixing it, but it will be fixed.
Okay, back to wrestling here. Just a couple questions left. You mentioned Mike Hughes is the best wrestler in the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada. Who do you think is the second best then?
Titus.
Titus. How did he do when he went to England?
Very well.
Very well.
Yeah, he had one of the best matches I've ever seen. Oh, and that brings up another. You would ask me guys that nobody ever heard of that are great. Mikey Whiplash. He works for Scottish Pro Wrestling now, but he was working for All Star at the time, and he worked Titus a couple times. And I worked in a town called Skegness. We had about 1,500 people in, and they had what might have been the best match I've ever seen. Titus and Whippy. It was unbelievable, and it wasn't the main event. I think it was second match, but what a match! It was just a. To this day, I remember me and Robbie Brooks had watched it through the curtain, and we were both, more than impressed. And I'll never forget the look of pride on Titus's face all day after that. He knew that he had been involved, and even though nobody will ever see it except for the 1,500 people that were there, he still knew he was part of something special.
Do you have anything that you'd like to talk about that I haven't mentioned?
Not really.
No? Do you have any closing comments for any friends, family, or fans that might be watching this?
Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting me through my career and the boos or the cheers, whatever it is that you felt like doing at the time. Yeah, it's been quite a ride. And although my body tells me it should be over, I think I still got a little more left in me.
Well, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out to do this interview. You're one of probably 3 or 4 people that I give credit to for allowing me to be a part of the maritime wrestling scene back when there was no other non-wrestlers around. You guys allowed me to be a part of your world from back then right up until now, and I couldn't be more grateful to you and a few other people that allowed me to be a part of it. So I just want to thank you for that, and thank you for doing this interview.
I remember the day I met you.
You yelled at me for 45 minutes.
Yeah. I kicked you out of the dressing room, didn't I?
No, I didn't go into the dressing room at my own show that I promoted. I didn't go to the dressing room until I got involved in 2001 with filming shows, and I didn't go into a locker room until probably 2005 or 6. My first show I promoted was the Maritime Cup in 2003. They wanted to get a group picture. So the photographer came out and asked me to go out back. I'm like, I'm not allowed out there. And then I think it was Mike or Bobby that came out, and he was like, it's your show. You can come out back. I was like, oh, okay. But,
well, that's good. I wish more people thought that way. I was just in Quebec on the weekend, and people had their kids and girlfriends and everything walking back into the dressing room. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was kind of different with mainstream wrestling because there was nowhere else to go when we did the bars and stuff. But when I was at shows with you guys and whatnot, I wouldn't never go anywhere near it. I can't remember who it was, but someone walked in the locker room last summer and just sat down. And then Sherry, Cowboy's wife, knocked on the door and wouldn't come in. And you were like, this person comes in, but the owner of the company won't come in.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the way it should be, I think.
Yeah, of course.
But no, again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out to do this interview and everything you've done for me over the last 15 or so years.
That was my pleasure, bud. I'll see you, in a few weeks in Truro.
May 13th, yeah?
Yep.